Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Data Dialogues. I'm Julien Redmond, General Manager at Certus Insight. My guest today is Ashwin Sinha. Ashwin's Chief Data Officer at Banking and Financial Services at the Macquarie Group. But more importantly, Ashwin and I used to work together at Certus. Ashwin's role now is to lead the Macquarie team through their transformation, and we're going to have a conversation about DataOps and how they're using that and the Data Vault methodology to lift their information management capability. So let's get into it. Thanks for joining, Ashwin. Maybe you could start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Julien. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashwin Sinha. I look after data analytics and customer engagement at Macquarie Bank. My background has been a long time sort of data practitioner, starting as an ETL developer, working through software engineering, then going into different technical leadership and consulting roles, and then finally landing here in terms of Chief Data Officer at Macquarie Bank. Very passionate about data and everything around data in terms of new capabilities, some of the emerging trends, how to become more efficient in this space, as well as how it creates sort of commercial value for organizations.
Fantastic, and we should probably mention that we've worked together in the past as well. So, look, we want to have a chat around DataOps, and that's a topic that I think, or a terminology that's certainly coming about, and more people are using it. Maybe you could give us your view, your personal view of what DataOps means.
Yeah. So look, I mean, if you think about what DevOps did to software development in terms of breaking some of the silos across different sort of IT teams and really accelerating sort of that continuous improvement and continuous sort of deployment process across software delivery. DataOps, kind of in very similar regard, is about how you bring sort of very high level of agility in terms of how you're using data for analytical purposes or for any other purposes. So how you think about the end-to-end process. It's not necessarily a solution or a technology. It's more a methodology, a process-driven methodology in terms of how you think about it. So agility would be a key aspect. Creating value in terms of analytics would be the other key aspect for me. And then the final one would be, how do you think about sort of improving the quality of data and information as it is flowing through your full pipeline in terms of delivery? So those would be the key aspects for me.
Yeah, and you mentioned value, and I think that's probably a really good place to start. Maybe from a Macquarie Bank perspective or from a personal perspective, what do you see as the value of DataOps? Is it, it's kind of blending the people, process, technology stuff that we've all been talking about for years together, but it's moving everyone up the maturity curve, and it's obviously a journey. It's not a thing you just implement. So where do you see that value kind of starting to play out?
Yeah, look, I mean, whole range of ways. I mean, the way I look at DataOps is sort of a combination of your agile capabilities, so how you operate in an enterprise agile environment and in a team which is doing sort of agile delivery, combination of some of the DevOps capability, and then you start looking at a combination of sort of well-designed information architecture and how you think about use of data for value creation. So it's a combination of those three things in terms of how you think about DataOps. What drives the value? So what drives the value is, to answer your question, is like, first and foremost, you could do very rapid experimentation. So your time to market, your time to users is sort of significantly reducing, and you're trying to compress those sort of delivery cycles, if I say. Second is you are continuously looking at improving the quality of insight as you go into a cycle of experimenting with it. And the final one, but the very most important one, is it kind of really enables a great sort of collaboration across your data engineers, your data scientists, your insight analysts, and the user community working together in terms of leveraging the value out of data.
Yeah, it's definitely changed the makeup of those teams in data engineering projects. So where do you see kind of cloud and SaaS solutions starting to fit into that kind of that value chain?
Yeah, I mean, for us, if I think about our own environment, our data pipeline and most of the data work sits on cloud. We were a bit ahead of the curve in terms of getting everything on cloud and migrating it there. What cloud gives us from a DataOps perspective fundamentally is the ability to sort of set up the environment very, very quickly, experiment with some new tooling, which could be up and started quite quickly, and our data scientists, data engineers can play with it. If it works and is really giving us efficiency, we look at that. If it doesn't work out, we can move on and try something else, which if you think about historically, the way it used to work is, or you procure something, then you set it up, and the whole process of setting it up, acquiring it, was in itself like 6 to 9 months, versus in cloud, you can start looking at it much faster. The other bit which I'll share also there is, you could do a combination of data ops and DevOps from really optimizing the cost of your infrastructure. And what I mean by that is, you can start looking at a bit of statistical analysis on your own sort of data pipelines and the infrastructure which it is using, to understand when you should have downtime, how you should sequence stuff, what causes most of the issues. And that really optimizes your spend on data infrastructure as well. So that would be sort of the other aspect, which with cloud and DataOps getting combined, makes your infrastructure very optimal, in addition to sort of giving you really ability to start and run the projects very, very quickly on a whole range of new tools.
So a lot more flexibility then, obviously, to run things up and try things and shut them down if they don't work. So you've got speed and you've got flexibility, but you've also got challenges like getting things from a data scientist experiment into production and into BAU and putting it in the hands of users. So, in your opinion, what are the pitfalls that that organisations might face if they jump too quickly into data ops and don't plan it out the right way?
I mean, for sort of any organization, and look, we are sort of in the first couple of years of looking at data ops across different aspects of our data management and analytics processes. But what I would say is, to get into it, you should really think through your architecture properly, the end-to-end methodology and the processes which are going to operate in this way, how you are going to set up the agile teams and the understanding of the teams that to make DataOps fundamentally successful. It's a really strong collaboration across those different groups which I spoke about earlier, in terms of the consumers and users of data, the data scientists or insight analysts who are making that insight available to the users, and data engineers who are sort of helping in getting the end-to-end pipeline working together. And in absence of that, sort of, it's not going to work. DataOps is not going to work. So what I would suggest is, one is the architectural foundation and how you are going to use the variety of tech and all the different aspects of processes together. And second is that collaboration and change mindset among the different sort of participants in this.
Yeah. So I guess, you've now got lots of people getting involved in the supply chain of data and testing things out. How do you guard against, potential for like self-service analysis being, spread out across your whole user community, and kind of guarding against, the privacy regulations and making sure you're managing customer data well, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of sort of very different perspective on this topic. So first and foremost is, if you, whatever purpose you're using it for, if you put customer at the center of it and you basically start thinking how is it going to benefit customer, then then your problem becomes a lot easier, because fundamentally whatever you're doing is for the benefit of customers. So that is the first thing, the principle sort of which I would try to sort of share with my team, that this is something which is quite important for us to be mindful of. The second one which I would say is, it's not people talk about, use of PI and self-service analysis and all, but what I would suggest is it's not necessary that you have to use PII for analysis. There are very few use cases which actually rely on PII. Most of the use cases you can do on data which is non-PII, and then you can link it to a PII at an identifier level, and then you can use just the referential integrity within your system and make the machine do that rather than exposing it to a developer or a data scientist or an insight analyst or a user. So my view on this topic is you do not necessarily need to give PII access to majority of your sort of participants or people or different roles within your DataOps sort of cycle.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great approach. So I guess, that probably leads into, in general terms, having a really strong information architecture to work with your DataOps processes. And so if you get that architecture in place, and you can establish DataOps processes and get the right people engaging well, what are the possibilities for business? What's possible?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is a lot that is possible. I mean, as I said earlier, that architecture, information architecture is sort of the key bit which a successful DataOps sort of methodology relies on. If you think about what's possible, you are looking at a whole range of experiments which you can run based on the data which is available, analytical experiments, I mean, which benefit the customer. So it's great from a customer experience perspective. So you start looking at, how you're servicing a customer. You start looking at what a customer is complaining you for. You start looking at protecting your customers from fraud. You start looking at what are the normal friction points for customers. So these are all the different things which you can start running your analytical experiments very, very rapidly. And you can evolve those experiments based on a very quick sort of data pipeline, which is quite efficient because of a structured approach from a DataOps perspective. The second thing which you can look at is your risk management process becomes better because everybody has got a good understanding of what is happening across your end-to-end data supply chain, all the way from your data engineers having sort of a very standardized set of processes, your data scientists and report developers and insight analysts really understanding how data is being provided to them and what are the steps it has gone through. And then your users having a lot of trust in the data as it is getting delivered to them. Now, when you think about it, and the other aspect which is there, of course, improving the quality of data as it is getting delivered. Now, when you think about that, what it does is it essentially gives you a good traceability on the data, the context of where the data is coming for what purpose, that is very clear to people. And then finally, when it is making into whatever end reg submission or compliance or whatever, you have got a good level of trust and understanding of what data is going there. And if you think about regulatory environment, that is something which a lot of regulators are very much interested in, is that you have traceability on the data, you really understand the quality of data which you are providing, and do you understand what sort of rules and calculations which are getting applied on it. So that way, if you start thinking of it from a value creation perspective as well as risk management, DataOps sort of really makes it much more easier for you to operate and much more flexible for you to operate in both of those areas.
Yeah, we had a recent podcast around digital transformation, and one of the key messages there was data and analytics being basically the foundation for all those digital transformation projects and initiatives. And I think that's kind of what you're saying in far more detail. So so that's really cool. Now, obviously, this is a Data Vault audience. So how do you see the Data Vault bit fitting into that information architecture space?
Yeah. So for us, as you know, Julien, we implemented Data Vault 2. Certus team did work with us, and so did Dan. For us, Data Vault has been significant in terms of giving us a lot of agility, especially when we are sort of looking at bringing data from a variety of our core product systems onto our data platform. So that has been one key aspect in terms of how Vault has helped. Second was we have been able to implement a whole range of frameworks to accelerate the development lifecycle, which is well understood by a large part of our data team in terms of how does the data move through raw vault and business vault and Infomart layers, not necessarily in a sequential manner, but what is the purpose of each of these layers. What it also does is it sort of standardizes the processes and what happens in each of those different layers. And finally, in terms of value to the customer, or value to the user, which we spoke about earlier, what it also does is, okay, you can move very quickly to an Infomart layer, and that doesn't take you a long time because you have got these frameworks in place, which means you can make the information available to the user much more faster. And last point which I'll make there is also that Infomart layer, what we are learning for our analysts and data scientists is that that layer becomes a layer which they can easily get their head around. So it's not a very normalized or a complex structure. It's a structure which they can easily get their head around and do a whole range of analytics on it and start leveraging that, and also supports self-service analysis.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know you guys have kind of started there and gone a long way from that foundation, and it's pretty impressive. So maybe one final question is, where do you see the potential benefits of DataOps, benefits and challenges around customer consent?
Yeah, I mean, customer consent is sort of a big topic when you think about customer data rights or open banking. But customer consent is fundamental in terms of how customers' data is getting used. You asked about privacy earlier and how that is being made visible to customers. It's a complex topic because if you think about the legacy environment in a lot of organizations, the complexity of how data is spread across the organizations, there is a need for sort of a standard methodology there, which has to be data oriented, hence sitting in the DataOps, in terms of how you are going to understand where what customer information is, what purpose it is getting used for, how can you ensure the deletion of that data when the customer requests, how can you make visible to the customer on what that data is getting used for. And the best way to do it is sort of having quite a structured and standardized process from a DataOps perspective across your entire data supply chain, to make sure that, okay, you really understand, okay, this is where the creation of the data is happening, this is where a lot of the processing is happening, this is where the provisioning is, this is where a lot of the analytics engine is running, and these are all the different purposes for which we are using it. Because then your ability to make it visible to the customer very quickly is easier. Your ability to get input from customer and say, okay, I think you should not be using for these purposes, or I would like you to delete sort of this sort of data, becomes a lot more manageable and efficient. And you are inherently, what you're doing is you are building flexibility in your data and information architecture.
Yeah, I think, there's a common thread, through a lot of these conversations. I think, that you've got a mature information architecture with a set of standardized processes, mature processes. It, gives you that flexibility, it gives you speed, but it gives you trust, and things like privacy and security fall into all of that. And I think that's where we're all heading, aren't we? Is having a set of standards to follow, or developing our own set of standards if that's for that particular organization, but making it standards based and template driven, so that it's not just kind of ad hoc code, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Spot on.
So, Ash, look, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the chat, and I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing. So, thanks so much for coming along.
Pleasure. Thank you.